here with New Moon Shiloh's, and today I'll be going over how to unpack your Holter monitor, how to put it on, start the process for the type of monitor I have, so starting the test, and then taking it off at the end. I'll also be attaching information on why we monitor below and on any social media posts. So we're not going to go over that very in depth today, but basically this is a required test for all of my puppies that I place between 5 months to 12 months to make sure they are clear of something called GSDIVA. So it's a 24-hour monitor test, very simple process. It can be overwhelming the first time you do it, so just take your time, and that's why I wanted to recreate this video to break down the steps easily, so it's a piece of cake for everyone involved. So first things first, we will go over what you should have before you even start the monitor process. My monitor is from Alba Medical. It's the DR-200 version. And there are different types of monitors. So if you do have a different type of monitor, there could be some variations with how you start your test or how many electrodes there are on the test itself, and to place on your dog, where to shave your dog. But overall, this is the general monitor that most people have. And if there are any differences, the whole setup process, putting it on the dog and taking it off, and tips and tricks for that will be pretty much the same. You would just follow the instructions included on how to start your monitoring process for the unit that you have. So first things first, you will receive the monitor. So in the monitor system for the DR-200, we have the monitor itself. So this is what we will be recording the test. So on the back of the monitor setup, there's a little battery pack there, and right above the battery, there's a little push spot where the SD card will pop out. So it's kind of hard to take this card out. Just be very careful and delicate with the unit, but take your time, and you can slide this bad boy out. So mine's brand new and it's a little tight in there. Oh, here it comes. So it'll just have an SD card. And if the SD card comes loose and it is not in your monitoring system, you just slip it right in face up and then push, and you'll feel it click and it's up in there. Once you stop your monitor, unless you're otherwise advised, you will not have to take that back out. You can just leave it in, but I'll talk to you about popping the battery out later and stuff like that to make sure it's not still recording. So make sure you have an SD chip within your packaged contents and the monitor reader itself. You will also have some form of lead attachments. So this is going to plug into your monitor. And then you have the different leads, which we'll talk about later, that actually connect to the electrodes on your dog. So you should have your leads in the system. Some will include a card reader. So when you go to put it in your computer to process the test, the card reader's already there for people that don't have any. And then you may see extra microchips in your set as well. Just don't touch them. Make sure they get sent back with everything. Whether you're one of my owners that's borrowing this monitor, renting it from a club or some kind of medical facility, getting it from your vet, just be very careful with all this equipment because it is very expensive. It took me 4 years to finally get my own, and it's like my baby and pride and joy. So I'm just saying that as a precautionary tale to really be mindful of this equipment and watching your dog when it is on your dog, and taking care of this stuff really well. Accidents do happen. It's not the end of the world, but to replace this equipment, it is very expensive. So that's my little memo there. You'll also get a little Holter kit. So I will break open this kit in a little bit, but you should have a bag with a battery and this maybe like a gold foil. It may look different as time goes on, and a patient diary. So that's your hookups for your electrodes, so you can hook your leads up to it. You may also have instructions in there showing you where the leads go, different troubleshooting tips. I believe they also have like Holter transmission instructions in there as well, but that's different for everybody. I do suggest you have scissors with you. I don't think anyone's going to send scissors with the Holter kit, but if you have even like medical bandage scissors, that's even better. But have a pair of scissors with you for taking it off at the end. You will need clippers for putting it on the dog. Some programs include clippers in their packages, some don't. So you will need clippers in order to cut the dog, little squares on the dog's side to put the electrodes. You may also have a little monitor pack, which I'll show how to slip that in later, a strap and a vest to put over on top of your dog once the test is running. So I will show you how to use all of this later, but these are just things that may or may not be included. I also suggest for taking off the Holter that you have some type of oil, so coconut oil, baby oil. Again, I will show you later, but have that on hand. One thing I don't have here today is I would definitely encourage you having a little bit of rubbing alcohol and cotton swabs or a rubbing alcohol pad as well. So that is not in this list. And then 2 rolls of vet wrap. Very important for me. I know some people do this differently, and that's totally fine, but I've never had a failed reading. So not to toot my own horn, but my way has worked very well. So 2 rolls of vet wrap. And I usually get the 3-inch rolls. And I think that I went over everything here. So that's it. Like I said, the only thing that's not here is the alcohol swabs. Everything else, this is what you will need to Holter your dog. So we're going to be Holtering 1, possibly 2 dogs in these videos. I'm going to be doing my young dog Portia, who just turned 5 months, and I'm hoping will promote or go into our program in the future. She's a spicy dog, so you may see Holtering a little bit more of a difficult puppy. Most dogs are very persistent about trying to get away with not following through with the process of monitoring. So it's normal for them to be naughty or dramatic, especially if you have a Shiloh and a young Shiloh. I will say more puppies are dramatic than not when I'm putting this test on, and that is fine. Don't worry about the antics. Don't get stressed out. Take your time, and you can do it in steps as well, especially like your prep work. Especially if your dog is not used to clippers at all, like having their feet, like their paw pads clipped or whatever. That is where the biggest struggle comes in, is the clippers. I will say it's also very useful to have a second person. There are times where I don't, and there are some dogs that is totally fine for, but having 2 to 3 people to assist, 1 or 2 to hold and 1 to do the work, makes your life so much easier. And then I also suggest making sure, this is a 24-hour test. Some people have it on for longer. Make sure you're putting this on in a time frame where you can watch your dog. Because like I said earlier, this equipment is expensive and puppies chew things, and we get that. One last thing you might want to do is have a t-shirt as well, which I'll talk about later. I forgot about that. I don't generally use that, but if it's raining, that can go into play later. So just make sure you can monitor your dog during that 24-hour period. I've had a puppy chew off leads 15 minutes before the test came off, leads being the wires in here. And that was like a $200 to $300 fix. So just be cautious, watch your dog while they have this on. Some dogs don't touch it at all. Some puppies hate it, and they're bothered by it, so they want to take it off. But it's not a painful test. If anything, wearing the vest, it just feels restrictive for the 24 hours. And if they're not used to that, then sometimes they can be a little mopey about it or whatever. As far as once your dog has the test on during those 24 hours, just some tips here. Make sure there's no really rough housing play. The monitor basically feels, it processes the rhythm of the heart. So not to say that this will absolutely mess up your test, but if you have other dogs in the house and they like smash that puppy off the wall with the monitor on, it could mess up your results. If you have an incident like that, the dog falls down the steps or does something stupid, because puppies can be dumb, there is a patient diary in here that you can mark the time that it occurred, just in case. Let's say the whole test is clear and we have one thing that we think is an issue. Then if it's at exactly that time, we can kind of rule out and go, well, that would make sense, right? So not to restrict your dog's playtime or motion, but you don't want them to be ran into the wall or super rough housing with this test on. You do still want a normal level of activity. I'm not saying to crate your dog for 24 hours and not let the dog move around, because you do want to monitor the dog's heart rate when they're doing normal activity. But you don't want to push it and make it so that there's an extreme situation that messes up the reading on your results or messes up your machine or so on and so forth. So, all right, we're gonna get into it here shortly and start with Portia and show you from start to finish how we put the monitor on her. So see you guys in a second. So here we are now with Portia. I was supposed to have an assistant. I do not, so we will see how this goes, but I know a lot of people will be doing so without an assistant. Always have a leash or at least a flat collar on the dog, and if you have a second person that they can hold the leash and help position the dog, that is definitely extremely helpful. So, first things first, when you grab your sheet, you're going to see that for my unit, for the DR-200, on the right side of the dog's ribs, so it's her right side, her right leg, you're gonna have 3 electrodes in a row. So it's red, white, green. On the left side of the ribs, you're gonna have 2 electrodes. So right now what's important to note is that this side is gonna have to be shaped more than the left side. So when we open up our pack, you have your patient diary, which you can set to the side. Every unit comes with, or every kit comes with its own battery. So it needs to have a fresh battery when we do this test, and it usually comes with one in the kit. So when you open up your gold foil, you're going to see that a bunch of electrode patches fall out. Now at this moment in time, because they have had changes made in the past, they are circles. So you can see the sticky side down, the blue is on top. Basically, you're going to shave an area on her right side that is big enough to encompass the width and length of 3 of them being stacked together. And I do tend to place them kind of one over the other, so that the electrodes on the base are not getting messed with. You want that circle to have full contact with the skin, but so that some of that adhesive is kind of together in line, and it makes you shave a little bit less of the dog. So I usually keep 3 of those out while I start this process, and we'll start on her right side since that's the bigger side to shave. So you're gonna need to flip your dog over, and she's not gonna wanna stand up or sit or anything for me right now, so we're just gonna kind of pull her around like a doll. When you shave, and I'm gonna lay her down for this, if you pull this leg backwards, the point where her elbow touches her side is going to be where you wanna shave. So that's where you can get her heart rate really good. That is the location of where you want those patches to be, is right here. So if I pull that back, you can see right where she's at now is where you wanna shave. So I'm gonna lay her down, and then I'm gonna shave these patches. This is where the second person usually comes in handy. She has been exposed to clippers, but not on her body, because why would we shave her at this point in life? So I'm pulling her elbow back, finding that point, and then I start shaving a little patch in that zone. Good girl. Good. And I start very narrow. I'll take a picture to put on the screen then. You have Vesta singing in the background. Take that hair off, make a little pile. And then I take my patch and I see, is it wide enough? It's just barely wide enough. I really like to be as subtle as possible with my shaving spots. That way, the only time you really notice that the dog is shaved is when they are running around outside, like fully stretched out. Going to double check that indeed this is enough space for my patches. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more. She is just 5 months, so the younger your dog, the younger your dog, the bigger that patch is going to be, but the faster it will grow back. And you want to make sure it's all the way down to the skin. So make sure I have a little bit more room here. So this patch is going to be bigger than the other side, mind you. So I'm going to let her up here. But you can see that you can just barely see that mark of where I shaved when she's sitting there naturally, which is what we want. Usually this is the point where I take an alcohol pad and I alcohol that area and I get all the fine hair that we just shaved off of her. I don't happen to have the alcohol pad today, so I'm just gonna clean that really good. And if you feel like your dog has a lot of like oil on their skin or buildup anywhere, you're definitely going to want to get an alcohol cotton ball or something and make sure that you clean that area good and let it dry off completely. So now we move to the other side. Okay, so we have both sides shaved and we cleaned off both sides and made sure they dried at this point. Now it's time to stick on your electrode patches. So, very simple task, and you can even do it with the dog standing as well. On the right side, you're gonna have 3 patches, left side 2 patches. You have to be careful that these stick very well, and that's why cleaning your surface and everything is very important. So let me get her over again when she's so sick of this. There you go, good girl. Okay. So when you take your patch, now this is her left side, so she's going to have 2 patches. When you take your patch, you want to spread the hair out of the way so nothing gets underneath, like the outside hair. Take the sticky off the base, pretty self-explanatory, but you want to make sure that base, like the underneath part, is pretty wet. They have fluid on it so that it's very easy for it to pick up the rhythm of the heart. When you put it on, I usually just hold my hand here for about 10 seconds or so. So the heat of your hand and the heat of your body help it stick really well. A few things can go wrong during the test. The electrodes can pop off of the stickies themselves. The other issue is that the patches can fall off while during the test. So using this method, applying it with heat and making sure it adheres definitely is very helpful. Now she's more curious. She's like, okay, this is fine. And I will say it is very hot right here because the sun coming through the door doesn't help at this time of day. Okay, so I'm just gonna place it right below. I don't overlap it a lot. I only overlap it so that basically all the stickies are kind of in a line and slightly attached. But again, you want to make sure that the base of that electrode has good contact with the skin. So I'm just going to hold here. Sometimes I even wiggle around for a second. She's like, all right, this part's not bad. Wait a little bit here. All right, and then I'm going to flip her over. And I'm going to put the 3 electrodes on the other side in the same way. Let's see if she allows me to do this while she stands. Take one off. Move all that hair to the side. And I start at the very top of that patch. Alright, once you have them on both sides, I like to just sit there for a little bit longer. Take your time with all of this. If you rush and you try to get through it too quickly, you want to set your test up for success. It can come back as having no reading. It's not set up right. So be slow. Take your time. Make sure everything's sticking really well. And then obviously take your time with your dog too. If your dog's having a hard time with it, you want to work through it, but make sure that the dog is relatively calm and comfortable the whole time. Like I said, she's tucking her tail and acting like this is the worst thing in the world, but that is just Portia at times. Okay, so if she stays there, that would be perfect. The next thing we're going to do is open up our kit. Take our leads, and again, reference this chart because it could be different based on your Holter. So each of these wires are color coded, and I've done this test dozens and dozens of times, but I still have to look at this chart showing me her right side. So I'm going to do red, and I usually pop the wires so they're this direction on the dog. So it just snaps right on to that electrode. Just make sure it's on nice and tight. Now at this point, you want to be careful that she's not yanking around, and that's again why a second person is very important. You don't want her to rush away and then the patch gets ripped off of her. And then you have to open up a new pack or order a new pack, and it's just a pain. So then I put this on top so that it's resting on the middle of her back. And I'm going to get the other two on the other side. So black on top, brown on the bottom. Same thing, you just pop them right on. Again, double check that they're all connected. Now at this part, you're going to open up your first roll of vet wrap. It's actually doing really good for me right here. I take the wrap and I do one full wrap around to connect it. And I make sure it's snug. You don't want this to be slipping. And then I'll take these wires and I'll kind of pull them back and loop them around so that I can make sure all the wires are not exposed. Again, if I had a second person, this is a lot easier. I urge you to have a second person. But you do not want any of these wires exposed at all. Take this up here. So at this point, all the extra wires are wrapped. Now I try to wrap up close to the armpit because this does usually slip a little bit. Sometimes I'll go in between the legs and out towards the front as well. So it's like a front harness. And then wrap, just use the whole wrap. Let my body heat get that vet wrap nice and taut. You don't want to strangle them with it, but you want it to be tight enough that it's pretty secure against the body. So now that we have our wires on, our patches on, and we have everything secured nicely, this is where I take my unit, make sure it has the SD card inside, connect to the side, and then place the battery in the unit. So once this screen comes on, it gives you instructions. Mine says enter to continue. Then there's a setting, it says new patient and setup. So I'm going to hit new patient, patient ID, it doesn't really matter what you put. I just put some random number. So it says press event if you're done and enter for next. What I'm looking at is there's going to be 3 heart rhythm lines on the front of this unit. You want to make sure they're all tracking the same and that nothing is like flatlining. So that's making sure that all your electrodes are truly connected and everything looks good. Once you assure that the lines are all working, also there's a little battery at the top corner. It says 100%, so my battery is fully usable and fully charged. So at this point, you're going to unclip this again. This was tight for me earlier. Take that battery out, because we don't want to start the test yet. Put this back for now, put the battery down. Now that I know the test is working, I have my electrodes on properly, that we're seeing all the right things in the right areas. That's when I start wrapping my dog up more. So I do send out a vest with mine, a lot of people do. So this is where you put that vest on. One foot, she puts it down. The other foot. This is probably going to be a little big for her. There's a hole in the top of the vest that you can run your line through. Make sure this is nice and snug as well. Okay, we have this guy on. This is the part where I actually start the test. So once again, I'm going to plug this guy in. Put the battery in. Follow the same process as before. Once again, I'm going to press enter, new patient, put it up to like 0, press event. I'm going to just double check that all 3 lines are there, which they are. Now what you're going to do is you're going to hold down the event button for 3 seconds. There's a countdown on the screen, and it'll say recording started. So you're then going to see a clock on the front. When you go to take everything off the next day, you want to make sure that clock is still on the front of the unit. Now at this point, I have a protective cover that I put over the unit. I loop this guy around, make sure it's nice and taut. I personally like to put the box on the top of the dog. So up by the shoulders, because you're not going to let your dog roughhouse and roll around with this on. If they can now lay down and be comfortable on their sides, but we want to protect the unit, and keeping it on top is the best place for the least friction. So also pay mind to what time you start it. So I started at 5:15. So 5:15 tomorrow, roundabout, I'll come back and take it off. Now you take your next vet wrap. Does not have to be as tight as the first time, but you're basically just making sure this box is covered, secured, and that they can't reach the test, the wires. It just holds everything in place really well. The other thing is if it rains, the vet wrap does help protect it. And then this is where they start acting really funny until they get used to it after a couple minutes of wearing it. So I'm just loosely doing this one, pulling it out, wrapping it. And I do use the whole thing because you may as well. You're already paying for it, you're already doing it. Use the whole thing, do it right the first time. Again, hold down that end piece of the vet wrap, make sure it adheres really well. All right, and now she has her monitor on. So that is that for this part of the puzzle. Then we just clean everything up, let her start getting used to it. Yes, there is a strap that comes with it that you can put over the monitor before you put the vet wrap on. To be honest with you, half the time I remember to use it, half the time I don't. But this would just be used over when we put the box on top. It'd be used over that to keep it in place. But this vet wrap keeps it in place really well. If it is raining, minimize the time that your dog is outside. But you can use a t-shirt. Or if you have a dog that's trying to chew at the vest and really annoyed by it, use a t-shirt as well. So just put the t-shirt over all of this, over the dog. It's going to have drapey shoulders, and then you can tie it with like a hair tie in the back to clamp it so that it is fully enclosed. So it's just adding an extra layer if you do have a problem puppy that does like to chew things or is really uncomfortable. For the most part, my dogs do really well. If anything, they just walk funny the first 30 minutes that they have it on, and then they're fine. So just watch your puppy. Make sure they're not chewing it. Make sure they're not doing anything funky. I will show you how to do this on a second dog as well, who's a little more cooperative and older. But that will just kind of be like a time lapse of me doing that. So we'll come back in 24 hours. If you want to leave it on, some people leave it on for up to 48 hours, fine, but 24, you should get a pretty good picture of the dog. It doesn't have to be spot on the 24-hour mark, but I want it to be at least 24 hours because sometimes some of the time is a missed recording, so it doesn't quite record everything that's happening with the dog, and they have a limit for how much information they need to consider it a full test, so you don't want to have to do it again. So we'll see you in another 24 hours to take everything off. You like it, Portia? She said, no, I don't. I do not. Okay, come here. And let's see her walk now. Pretty good. All right, guys, here we are 24 hours later. Actually, a little later than 24 hours, but regardless, the next day. We're gonna take off the monitor now. Very simple process. First things first, you're going to take off the first layer of vet wrap. If everything was secured nicely, this is the easiest portion. You can take your scissors. Just be careful you don't cut the vest. Cut off that vet wrap. Just in one strip. Now, you're going to take your monitor out of the pack Make sure that the clock is still running on it. The battery is most likely still going to be full. We just have to make sure it runs for that 24 hours, which is why we put the new battery in. So what you're going to do is you're going to pop open the back and just take the battery out. That's going to stop the test. Get it the right way. There you go. Put that back on. Leave your SD card in there for now. Now that the battery is out, we're going to disconnect the unit from the cable. And I always like to keep my box close by so I can put everything away as I am taking it out. Now you're going to undo your vest. Like I said, this part is simple. Pull that cable through. The dog's going to start to feel a lot of relief because they've been wearing this for 24 hours. Toss that over to the side. Now this is where you want to be careful because I kind of wrapped the lines in the vet wrap. So be mindful, however you wrap this, if you wrapped it right around all the wires at one time because you had an extra person, great, you can take the scissors, but I usually do not use the scissors to take off this piece of vet wrap. So make sure when you're wrapping it that you can access the end of the piece, and then I'll just slowly unravel so that I don't cut any wires. So you definitely do not want to cut any of these wires. Once again, expensive equipment. Okay. Usually I have a garbage pile at this point. Now, make sure that your leads are all connected still. Everything looks good. The electrode patches are still on. So she looks good. Nothing came loose. That's a good indicator that her test is going to come back just fine. So you're just going to pop off all the wires. Wrap these up nicely, put them back in the box. This part here, taking off the electrodes, this is where the coconut oil comes in, or you can use baby oil as well. It does not matter. I'm gonna put her up on the gate again. She's been doing pretty good with that. So this helps detach the sticky pads very, very well. So I'll just take my finger, goop it up with some oil, be generous, find the edge of that electrode and just start kind of smearing it in. Once you get it going, it's really easy. You can see they just rub right off. And then that coconut oil also helps alleviate any like itchiness they may have been having or irritation. So if you try to rip these off, it is not fun. You can see how easily, like these were really stuck on there. You can see how easily they all just came off together. That's why I kind of overlapped them too. Do that for the other side, same exact thing. It almost feels like a nice massage for them. Okay. Usually what I'll do too, I'll inspect the skin, and actually hers looks perfect. It's not irritated at all. Sometimes the dogs can get a little irritated where those patches sat if they have any kind of sensitivity to the sticky part or the gel that's on the electrode itself. I'll usually take a paper towel or a towel and I'll wipe as much of this off as possible because dogs love coconut oil, so you don't want them to be licking their sides and irritating them more if there is irritation. Like I said, do not be concerned if there's a little bit of irritation. Just make sure the dog's not touching it. And I've had one or two that got a little irritated. Within a day, it looked totally normal. So hers looks perfect. Now you can see when I spread it, there's that big patch. But once the hair is down, you really can't tell. Now she's got coconut oil on her hair. So that's it. That's how you take it off. We are going to now submit her test, which there's going to be instructions included, or call your breeder or give it back to your vet for transmission, whatever. Whoever you're renting it from, whatever their strategy is. And then we will do a quick time lapse of me putting it on my other dog, Kepler.